It's not scary if you go into it going, I'm just trying it out. It's like if you're a chef and you want to try out like a new souffle, you've just got to be okay with the fact that sometimes it's going to fuck up. And at some point you might just go, do you know what? It probably isn't worth it, and that's fine. But if every time you make your souffle and it doesn't work out, you feel like it's personal, or that if people don't like it, it's personal, then you'll never cook again. You'll never bake again, because you'll just think, well, I'm obviously not good at this. This is obviously to do with me, and it's not. A joke is something you produce, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Hello everyone and welcome to Chai with Rai. Hi, I'm your host Rai, and each week I bring you a guest or a fruitful message from the creative industry, all while sipping and spilling some hot garam chai and discussing all things life and culture surrounding the creative industry, of course. Now, if you haven't done so, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. If you love this podcast and are listening to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, or wherever you stream this podcast from, if you could do me a kind favor and make sure to rate the podcast and share it on your stories, on social, on the WhatsApp groups, on the Twitters, on the Flitters, and spread the word. It organically grows the show and connects us with listeners who haven't tuned in before, and overall just shares the love. So without further ado, let's warm up our cuppers and let's dive into today's episode with writer and comedian Bas Rahman. So I like to start the show, if you haven't tuned into the show, with a little bit of like a buzz round, like we do a little bit of a game, and then we get into deep, meaningful conversation. So it is basically, you have 5 seconds to say 3 things.
Okay.
So we'll do a test run. So say 3 things, list 3 things, whatever. So we'll do a test run and then we'll get straight into it. So in 5 seconds, list 3 things we will find at your bedside table. Go.
Tissues, pillows, sorry.
Why would we find pillows on your bedside table?
Oh, bedside table, was it?
Yeah, not on your bed.
Okay, sorry. I thought you said on. Okay, I thought you. Okay, right.
Well,
actually, that's technically true, because I don't have bedside tables yet, because I only moved in last year. So I still don't have bedside tables.
I was going to say, what would you find at your fridge? So maybe we should do that quickly. So
okay.
What would we find in your fridge? 3 things, go.
Bread, coriander, chilies.
Nice. White bread or brown bread, and brown bread with seeds? Like, what are we doing?
Sourdough.
Oh.
Any variety of sourdough?
I feel like sourdough is quite overrated now. I'm over it.
Yeah, the only reason is because I've heard it's marginally better for you than regular bread.
Yeah,
marginally.
M&S, Waitrose, what are we doing?
Oh no, I'm no, like Tesco's and Sainsbury's. That's fine.
Do you have a club card or you don't?
I do. I recently got a club card, and it felt like I'd opened like Aladdin's Cave of Treasures.
Because of the discounts?
Discounts. And they take the piss, mate. When you don't have a club card, they're like, this is £80 for some eggs, or £2 club card.
That's the South London in me now coming out saying in it.
Yeah.
In it though. All right, this is now no longer a trial run, and we're going to get into it. So on the podcast, on the stool, you talk about having an alias, Melinda Carbuncle. And perhaps if that was not your alias, but your actual name, you would be, quote unquote, I'm doing this, more successful. So with that in mind, list 3 companies Melinda Carbuncle would own. Go.
A yoga studio, a Pilates studio, and a curry masterclass.
5 seconds. You have 5 seconds.
Hang on, I got that in before the 5th one. I got that in before I just didn't complete. Hang on, if this was Mastermind and it was I've started so I'll finish, I would have got that.
No. 5 seconds when? Also, why is she in the fitness industry owning just yoga, Pilates, and...
Because I feel like a Melinda Carbuncle is that sort of that privileged white woman who just, like, her identity is based around all other, like, ethnic group identities. Do you know what I mean? They just absorb all... I was going to say, like, a Zumba class or something like that. Do you know what I mean? And also because I feel like ladies like that, where the only thing that they ever have to worry about is their pelvic floor. You know what I mean? So it's just like various ways of, it's just days of working out and, being fabulous.
I feel like Melinda would live in Camden. I don't know why, or Hampstead. I feel like she would have a house, either one of those 2 areas.
I want to say Hampstead.
Okay. So this, in an alternative universe, you never know. In the multiverse of things, you never know. Or a couple years from now.
Yeah.
You never know. All right. Next question. On your bio on the Gig Gag comedy website, you are described as Muslim female stand-up tackling issues around race, religion, and culture and expectations. Often dark, often blue, often uncomfortable, but always fun and funny. You also say in one of your interviews how in some comedy nights, there's always a male comedian who tells a poorly ill rape joke. So with that in mind, list 3 comedians, male comedians, whom you find overrated. Go.
Jack Whitehall, Josh Widdicombe.
Ah! You do know I was going to make this dark, and I was going to say list 3 rape jokes that are funny, but then I was like, oh, I don't know. Tready Waters.
Yeah, I actually can't think of many that I think are particularly funny, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. I just don't, nothing comes to mind. I have to confess, there isn't a chamber of my brain that stores credible rape jokes. Maybe that's a flaw in me as a person. Maybe that's something I need to address.
Did you ever watch the Joan Rivers comedy documentary?
I don't think I did, no.
No, she has a really great, I would heavily, if you're into that, she talks about, in one section, she talks about how comedy needs to be dark. And in this day of cancel culture, that is the way we get through it. So she was joking about 9/11 and people were like pushing on her. And she even made a rape joke, I think, to a presenter where she was like, look at your face. If your dad didn't rape you, who hell would? You wouldn't have lost your virginity and shit like that. And she was like, it is comedy that gets us through the darkest times. And sometimes you need to know that boundary of it is a joke. It is nothing else but just a joke.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think what happens far too often, and this is why I talk about the rape joke thing. I think far too often, while people are learning their craft, there is something about understanding and truly understanding what the subject is and what the target is. And, you know, there's a very well-known comic who talks often about that. But I feel like that person themselves has been guilty of not being able to traverse that line well. And at times, often to my mind anyway, I think has gotten that wrong and really has gone after the subject rather than the target. And so I think when people are finding their feet with it, they don't quite understand what they should be trying to focus in on and laugh at. So the Joan Rivers joke, without deconstructing the joke now, it's funny because she's really saying that the girl is so ugly that the only person that would rape her is her dad, right?
Yeah.
It isn't about people who suffer incest or rape. It isn't really about that. So it's, yeah, although it's obviously undoubtedly very dark, that's not a joke that I think is poorly made or in poor taste, but it is dark, so it's not for everyone.
True. By the way, I'm paraphrasing it, so internet, do not come for me. All right, your last question before we get into deep conversations. In looking further into your career, I saw that you are a Funny Woman 2022 qualifier, a comedy competition finalist, and a part of All Females Comedy Writers Room, ERA 50/50, with BAFTA winner Joanna Scanlon. So with that in mind, list 3 things you would run on as your presidency for Prime Minister of UK 2024. Go. There's your 5 seconds.
I'm not good at the 5-second thing. I'm really not good at the 5-second thing. Also, these are quite, I have never really thought about this stuff. What would I bring in?
Yeah, what would you, let's break this question down quickly. What party would you run for?
Definitely a left-leaning party, for sure, a left-leaning party.
Okay, so in that, what would be the one thing that you would want to happen that would be like your thing that you would run on?
I mean, I don't have a funny answer to it.
It doesn't need to be funny. It can be actually just like deep.
Okay, I think general funding into social care and mental health care. I think those are the biggest primary things for me. Yeah.
Why couldn't you have said that before?
Because I didn't understand your question. You were talking about Area 50/50, and then you were talking about other things. I was like, is it supposed to be related?
No, things are meant to throw you off. That's the whole point. That's
okay. Well, consider myself thrown.
All right, now we're gonna get into deep, meaningful conversations. I'm gonna start this chat with, didn't realize you paint. We have that in common.
Oh, yes. Oh, did you?
Yeah, I paint as well.
Are these yours in the background?
No, not those. Mine are like in the other room, which I'll show you at the end of the thing. Intrigued to know where painting came to be. Have you always painted? How would you define your style? Would you like to do it full time? Do you sell anything? Do you want to plug it? Talk to me.
So I started drawing when I was like a baby. I even remember being quite young and being a bit of an arrogant shit about it and being like, yeah, that's much better than everyone else in the class.
One of those. You were
one
one
of
of
those.
those. All
I was
right.
one of those. But also I was really lucky because back in my day when I was in primary school, there was loads of creative flexibility, tons. And my teachers always really pushed that and they really praised me and celebrated the fact that I was very creative. It started when I was very little and very young, and then didn't do it at GCSE because it wasn't, I suppose I didn't want to disappoint my parents and do art at GCSE because it's not like the credible, plausible thing to do, is it? It's not science. It's not
Yeah, but it's better than going into the arts as an actor or a comedian.
yeah. I mean, that's true. That's true. If they'd only let me paint, maybe we wouldn't be sat here today.
You never know, you could still.
Exactly. Well, so yeah, and then I did it for A level, and I loved it, and that was the first time I ever actually got to paint properly. Like our primary school was really like heavily underfunded. It was a primary school on a council estate, quite deprived council estate. So we didn't really have resources like that. So the first time I actually really painted was when I was like 17, 18 years old on like canvases and stuff, because I went to Thomas Tallis, which is now, I mean, it's like a brand new shiny school. But at the time it was a creative school. So like an artsy sixth form and school. And so when I went to sixth form and I went there, they had all these art resources. And so that was where I started painting and realized how much I loved it. And I still do it now when I have time to unwind, but it hasn't happened so often because comedy's just been really, really busy. But when I get some time, I like to sit and paint.
Do you know why? I don't know why this came to me, but have you ever seen those people that go on Britain's Got Talent that like paint within 30 seconds?
Oh, yeah.
Imagine if in a world you're painting whilst you're telling jokes. How would that turn out?
Not well. Not well. I mean, I'll be honest with you. You've tried to get me to answer questions within 5 seconds, and 3 seconds of the answer has been So getting me to paint in 30 seconds is not going to happen. I'm very much an when it comes to painting as well.
Yeah.
It takes me ages to paint.
Maybe what if you wear a Britney mic and we give you 5 minutes instead of 30 seconds? Wait, how long is usually a set? Like about like 10 minutes, 20?
So it depends. I think these days I like to get at least sort of 7 to 10. But yeah, I mean, standard when you're starting out is about 5 minutes.
Okay, so in 7 to 10 minutes, do you feel like you could do a painting and tell jokes?
No.
In a couple of years, do you think we could be there? I really am trying to make this happen. Because then, should I tell you why? Because I'm turning this into a business strategy. Because then you could sell it after, and you could like photograph it and sell it as like graphic t-shirts, and they could be like taglines of things like that you could put it on the t-shirts and then do the merch.
Okay, how about we'll make a deal, right? If this podcast goes viral and skyrockets,
okay,
then I will do that.
Wow, really coming for me. Coming for me. How dare you? My next question, again, before we get into deep, meaningful conversations, is let's talk hair.
Okay.
I love talking hair. I've seen your hair now blonde. I've seen your hair red. And I'm seeing it today, not straight, but in curly patterns. What is the shortest you've had it? What is a color that you haven't done that you would like to do? Yeah, let's go with those first. And how do you always luscious and long?
Thank you. Well, shortest I've had it, shaved.
When you were a child or like in your teen years?
Well, my mum at the age of, I want to say...
Oh my God, your mother was the same as well. Finish your story.
I mean, I'll be honest. I don't think it's as bad if a boy gets his head shaved.
No, my sister. I'm talking about my sister.
Oh, your sister? Right, okay. So this happened to me when I was about 8 or 9 years old, because my mom was like, your hair's not growing properly. We need to shave it. We have to shave it.
It's going to grow back healthier. Why do they think that?
Don't know. But yeah, so they shaved it. And I remember going to school on a Friday and having hair, and then going to school on a Monday looking like G.I. Jane. And I remember people at school like, what have you got your hair shaved for? And I couldn't give them an answer because I didn't know why it happened. Yeah, that's the shortest it's been. And then the color that I wanted to do like a dark emerald green.
Oh.
And my mum was like, she was like, why do you want people to think you're a witch? Do you want people to think you're a witch? Is that what you want people to think when they see you? They go, oh, there's a witch. Her hair's green. So I didn't do green hair. I don't know if I'd still want to do that though. The thing is, I love having dye in my hair, but it's so much upkeep and it's so expensive. I don't know that I have the time for it now. And now this is natural. This is natural curls.
Wait,
Yeah.
so did you have curly hair as a kid growing up, or it was like wavy and straight?
No, it was straight when I was young. It was straight up until about a year ago. And it just
Oh,
suddenly started going curly.
no perm, no nothing.
No,
Wow.
no.
No, look at that.
Yeah. I mean, this is naturally, and I don't mean to rub it in, but this is naturally dried hair.
This is just naturally delicious and great. No curling iron, no Dyson, no GHD, no nothing. It's just like
Yeah.
this.
No,
So Pantene or L'Oreal, give us a call, please.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Yeah.
We'll be here to say worth it for that 10 million pound check.
I'll settle for a one, to be honest,
No, why? If you could get 10, why are you going for one?
because they're not going to give me 10 million, are they?
But like, why are you thinking so low of yourself? Think 10 million of yourself and then you get 10.
Well, I'm not. I forgot the alias that I made up. What's her name? Miranda Chapman. What was her name?
Miranda Chapman, Miranda Carbuncle.
Miranda Carbuncle. Yeah,
Melinda, sorry, Melinda.
Melinda.
You're gonna get this. All right, let's talk deep, meaningful conversation. Intrigued to know your style and voice as a writer. And do you like comic or comedian? Because some people prefer comic and some people prefer comedian.
I have no preference. Comical comedian, both perfectly fine.
I will just use one of. I'll just keep going back and forth. Interested to know your style as a writer and as a comedian, and when you did your first gig versus your last gig, and how that has evolved and changed. And did you know when you entered and started doing this that you would be at the point where you are today in terms of your styling?
I have always had quite a dark sense of humor, and I've always liked the idea of making people feel uncomfortable, but not for the sake of it. Although I think shock humor has its place, and I think shock humor has its place if it's part of like a wider set. But I don't believe in just saying outrageous things just to get a reaction and that's it. So I've always been a fan of that. Like huge influences on me were Legal Gentlemen and Chris Morris and Charlie Brooker's work. I mean, even when he was like writing articles and things like that all the way back then. Although I also would like to concede the point that I understand that Legal Gentlemen is very problematic in many areas. The fact that they kind of blended a lot of like horror movies and they did this seamless blend of comedy and horror was always something that I found really interesting. And so that's still something that I do now. In the early days, which you may well come to at some point, it was a character. I used to do a character act, and I would be covered in blood and I'd bring someone up on stage with me and I'd have jokes within the set, obviously, but the main thrust of it would be that we would all be enjoying how uncomfortable this person was on stage with me. So I think there was that sort of at the very beginning of my doing stand-up, there was a more direct link between sort of horror and comedy. And now with the jokes that I do, I still like to make them dark. There isn't a ton of horror involved. They're just because I don't really know how you would do that, although it's interesting. I might think about that. But yeah, there's a lot of darkness involved in what I do on stage and my styling. And yeah, and I do still like to make people feel uncomfortable. But hopefully people understand why. If they don't understand at the time, they understand at the end.
Intrigued to know, now we're going to move on to ERA, how your involvement happened with that, and for people that don't know, the equal representation aspect of it for actresses, what it stands for, and why you don't support it. You feel like they shouldn't get paid more. They should be paid less, if anything.
So, Era 50/50, that came about during lockdown. So I believe that the origins and the idea of having this all-female writers' room came about pre-COVID. I'm pretty sure of that, but it came into fruition during COVID. And it was just an application process. You had to apply and submit a script or a sample of a script, and then you were selected to be part of this all-female writers' room. And that was how I got onto it. And Era 50/50 is about having more female representation in writers' rooms. So although there's obviously, to do with sort of a lack of representation in production, but also on set with crew and things like that, this was more focused on writers and getting more female voices out there. And so it was a group of women that were put together to try and create a script, which we did. And it's still it's not completed yet. Like, so we have a script that we are working on still, but scripts often take years and redrafts and redrafts and redrafts before they go anywhere. So we're still kind of in the trying to see where it fits kind of situation. I think we're probably still due for some redrafts and some reworking, but it was a really amazing group of women to connect with, and obviously some people from that I'm like sort of personal fans of as well. So it was amazing, a really, really, really amazing scheme to be part of. And I wish there were more things like that, for women or people of color or other underrepresented groups to find their voice somewhere and know that there is somewhere for them to get their work seen, at least, and to be taken seriously as a creative.
And be paid for it. I think, like, you were just saying something which I'm always fascinated by. When you go to the redraft stages, sometimes you don't get paid. You're just doing unpaid redrafts for so many times, and there's only a handful of schemes or grants that you can apply for and attain successfully when you're getting paid for all that work. Otherwise you have to do, like, I hate the term, but like side hustle whilst you're working on your craft, which I find just ridiculous.
Yeah, and all of us were pretty much. I mean, I think there were a few people there who weren't and didn't need to do that, but a bunch of us were. I mean, I just do a regular day job. A couple of the other girls also do regular day jobs, and some of them are like sort of jobbing actresses and things like that. So it's tough. Like that, you really need to have a lot of drive to want to do this and to want to succeed, because it's hard. It's a lot of graft. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of work.
Okay, so it's the viability and the survivability of stand-up and the lifestyle that goes along with, like, the touring elements of it.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, actually, because I remember talking to my partner's best mate's girlfriend about this. And
such a long-distance relationship.
Yeah.
My best friend's partner's girlfriend.
Exactly, yeah. But we were talking about a musician, and I said I don't think it's right to posture. I don't think it's right to posture as something that you're not, particularly when the thing that you're trying to be is working class. Because I think, unfortunately, in order for you to, this is in my experience anyway, in order for you to be able to get around the country and gig and get your name out there at the level that you need to, which is pretty much sort of 4 days a week, I would say, gigging. I mean, I suppose you can have a day job, but you would have to have a day job that would offer extreme flexibility. So I think in the days when we could work remotely, perhaps that was an option. Perhaps you could just go to Manchester for the day, work for the day, get an Airbnb, gig at night, stay over, and then come back the next day. But now, where there's a requirement for you to be in the office and so on and so forth. It just doesn't seem compatible for you to have a day job that pays the rent or the mortgage, pays your bills, that also keeps you afloat when you're doing comedy and you're jobbing. Even if you're getting paid for comedy, unless you're getting paid sort of thousands of pounds per gig, feels a little bit like it's no longer a working class pursuit anymore. I mean, I certainly at the beginning when I was starting out, I was in retail, and I'm no longer doing that. But I couldn't really sustain the lifestyle of having a day job and doing comedy, which was why at the very beginning when I started doing comedy, I had a very relaxed attitude to it, because I actually couldn't. I mean, there were a few things I didn't quite have the drive then, but there was also the practical element of knowing that if I get in at 12:30 at night and then I have to be up 6 hours later to get to work, I can't do that. I can't do that on an indefinite. Certainly can't do that 3 days a week. And that would be me gigging in London. So if I wanted to gig elsewhere, there was just no way that I could do that. So even though I don't do that now, I don't work in retail now, I still have to, there's still a requirement to be in the office a certain amount. And my day job can be very demanding sometimes. So it often feels like the way that you do get out to gig around the UK and even further afield is either to have a job that has a lot of flexibility, or for you to not work. And that's where I make the connection between being able to enjoy a middle class privilege, which is to not have to work and to pursue your creative pursuit without having to worry about where the next paycheck is coming from, how your mortgage is going to get paid. And that's also the reason why I feel like places like Edinburgh at the moment, to me, it's completely unconscionable that it's become somewhere. I mean, the thing is, I'm a homeowner. I have a mortgage, and I'm doing okay for myself. But I still can't afford Edinburgh. It's still way too much for someone like me to go up there. So for anyone who is starting out, unless they're on a lot of money, or unless they're like teachers and they have the summer holidays off or something like that, it's completely boxing out a massive chunk of talent. And most of the comics that I can think of that I enjoy the most, there are some exceptions, but most of them are working class. And it's because it gives you a grit and a view of reality that is more well-rounded than if the only thing you've ever had to worry about is what flavor yogurt you're going to have for, after dinner,
May I ask am I interrupting a thought, or can I interject?
No, go for it.
I'm intrigued to dig more because I feel like there's a lot of similarities between comedy stand-up and cabaret sometimes, or drag performing. And I'm intrigued to know like the billing system, if it's okay to dig into it. Do you go based on like merit, the amount of pay that you get? Like, is it £100, £200, or does it go on like who's headlining, who's hosting? Is it profit share? Like, intrigued to know the mechanics of that.
It can be all of the above, really. I mean, I'm still doing gigs where I don't get paid. By and large, I'm still doing gigs where I don't get paid. I will occasionally have gigs where I am getting paid a certain amount of money. But the other thing as well is that there's for people that run pro night, they also need to see you first. They need to see you on stage before they will offer you anything paid. So sometimes you do have to do some of the groundwork and take the hit and not get paid in order to get something paid at some point in the future. So for me, I will, if it's a gig that I know that is further afield or is going to be more of a time drain on me, I'll look at the viability of pro spots. I'll look at who else they've had on in the past, and if I think that I can compare to those people. And also, yeah, absolutely right, who else is on the lineup? Networking is really important, and it's great to be seen by people that are doing great things. And so, even just kind of talking to those people and picking their brains about certain things can be really useful.
So in terms of then, my question to you is, from like knowing obviously very little that I know about you and just researching things like that, I feel like you've been doing this for like 10 years because I saw your comedy stuff from that, and I'm sure you've been doing it pre that as well. What point is the cutoff point for you where you go, okay, now I need to get paid? And for me, I'm thinking of it from maybe an agent or booker perspective. If you have archival video footage, let's say, of you out there doing gigs, then for me, shouldn't that be enough to book you for a paid gig?
So I have a long history with comedy, but that also doesn't reflect how long I've actually been doing stand-up for. So I started around it's probably close to about 10 years now. But in the first few years, as I mentioned, I was doing retail. I was still working in retail as a day job. So I very rarely gigged. I think in about 3 years, maybe 4, I did about 50 gigs, which is nothing.
Wait, why is that nothing? That's still a lot. I'm comparing it to like as a job in actor. If you do 50 plays in 3 years, that's a lot.
So, but you're thinking about it as 3-hour shows, right? A play, or on average, like 3-hour shows.
You're thinking about the time where you just do a 5-minute slot in. Got it.
Yeah. So 55-minute gigs in 3 or 4 years is not very much at all. And so, although that was my entry into comedy, to me it was a bit of it was like a false start for me, because I wasn't going into it for the right reasons. I wasn't doing it for the right reasons. And so therefore there's a very low glass ceiling on that. Like at some point I'm going to hit it and go, right, I can't go any further because my reasonings for doing it weren't right. Then I took a bunch of time out to write, and I did that. And then I came back into comedy in 2018, and then COVID happened in 2020. And so this is my third kind of go at it, really. So I kind of consider myself to only really started starting taking stand-up seriously from 2018. But that said, I wouldn't rubbish or poo-poo any of the experience that I got from that first time round, because it meant that I could traverse the circuit with some prior knowledge, and it meant that I ascended quicker than I did the first time that I started doing it.
You've mentioned Drive a couple of times. Intrigued to know, because I think for actors or directors or writers, sometimes it's the art of storytelling. And often comedians talk about coming from a dark perspective. That's why they want to make people laugh. And I'm intrigued to know, what was your drive in starting out, and what is your drive today then?
I think my drive starting out, being completely honest,
Say money and fame.
no, it wasn't. It wasn't even that. It wasn't even that. Even more human. I was a very ugly child, right?
Oh,
Actually, that's not true.
Why are you no. I refuse to believe this as somebody who thought they were the shit in art class. I feel like you were one of the mean girls. I'm just saying it right now.
No. Let me tell you something. I was actually, that's what I just said there is technically not true. I was a beautiful baby. I was a cute baby. And then bang, 11 years old hits, and my nose doesn't fit my face. I'm 70% eyebrow. I have no body shape. It was just very, very bad.
This makes me pissed at the new Gen Z kids who are on the fucking TikToks and shit like that.
I know.
Acting, dying, doing their shit. They don't know how it feels to go through the 2000s and be
absolutely being butters, right? As a teenager, I feel like that's a rite of passage.
It is. These kids don't live through it. They want to look like 30-year-olds these days.
Exactly. So I think I carried that ugly girl energy well into my sort of mid-20s, I think. And I still think that's part of like the bedrock of my personality, is still understanding or actually appreciating that I'm no longer an ugly teenager, right?
You need to stop.
But and the thing is, it was a good thing, because it meant that I never relied on how I looked, and I never relied on how I looked. And so I always knew that I needed to be smart, I needed to be switched on, I needed to be funny, I needed to have personality, I needed to figure out other people in order to get on with people, because my looks weren't sure as shit weren't getting me anywhere.
I hate you.
So when I started doing comedy, I think I was still trying to find validation as still in my mind being an ugly duckling. And I think I got that. I think I happened to be funny. I happened to actually be good at it. But because I was going into it all the wrong reasons, I wasn't prolific in creating new material.
Oh, prolific. Sorry.
So what I was doing was I did this set, and it did really well, and I got the respect of pretty much all of my peers at the time, and I kind of thought, fuck, I can't let this go, because what happens if I do another set and it's crap, and then everyone just thinks I'm a one-trick pony, and then people lose respect for me and all the rest of it. It was very much to do with getting the approval of other people. And so the glass ceiling was very low and very thick, and so before I knew it, I'd hit it, and that was it. I couldn't really go any further. And so I think that was what it was. That was what it was when I started out. And now it's not. Now it's way healthier. Like, I care less in the best possible way. I mean, before, the idea of dying in front of a crowd, which is really scary to everyone, I think.
That was going to be one of my next questions. Yeah.
It's really scary if you're going into it for the wrong reasons, I think. It's not scary if you go into it going, I'm just trying it out. It's like if you're a chef and you want to try out like a new souffle, you've just got to be okay with the fact that sometimes it's going to fuck up, and at some point you might just go, do you know what, it probably isn't worth it, and that's fine. But if every time you make your souffle and it doesn't work out, you feel like it's personal, or that if people don't like it, it's personal, then you'll never cook again, you'll never bake again, because you'll just think, well, I'm obviously not good at this is obviously to do with me, and it's not. A joke is something you produce, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I think if you go into it thinking, oh my god, I'm humiliated because no one laughed at my joke, it can be your undoing, and I've seen it happen for certain comics, for sure.
We shan't name them. After, maybe. Interested to know your opinion, because I looked at it from a dance perspective when I used to choreograph and things like that. I'm intrigued to know, which I asked before, how long you do a bit before you're like, okay, locked, done, no longer want to touch it, or it's going to be in the archive for like when I get my Prime, HBO, Netflix special, or I'm going to recycle this like a repertoire until I fine tune it to like the T. And I discriminate on this sometimes because I look at it from a perspective of not a script that I'm doing in different spaces, but as somebody who can improv or like choreograph. And if I'm touring those choreographies or those improv things again and again, I'm like, oh, I want to be able to give something that's special to this audience and related to them, as opposed to give the same thing. So yeah.
So it's interesting you say that. My closing joke I've had.
Oh, that's why you don't drink anymore.
Well, I don't drink. Yeah, that's actually a joke that I made the very first time that I did comedy.
Has anybody ever come to you and been like, was that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had people at the end of shows go, did that actually happen? And I'll get that. So obviously didn't happen.
Imagine if you're like, and
yeah, well the thing is, I love that joke. I love that joke because usually at some point there's someone in the audience who's taken in, there's at least one who's taken in who thinks that it's real. So I love doing that joke. But I do that joke because I think it's a really accurate representation of my style of comedy. So if I'm doing a joke, if I'm doing a set with a view to be booked going forward, I put that in or I put in an equally dark joke, like I might do my Jeffrey Dahmer joke or something like that, because I want them to know that there'll be a flavor of that. If you book me, say in 6 months' time, I might not be doing that joke and I might be doing the Jeffrey Dahmer joke, but there probably will be another dark joke in there somewhere, or something that will make your crowd feel uncomfortable, because I want you to be aware of that. So sometimes it's a strategic thing. Sometimes it's just because I love it. I think it's a really nice closer. But a lot of the stuff that I did from years ago, even I don't remember anymore, which is really bad, because it's stuff that's got me to where I am now, which means it can't have been crap. But I think it's always good to have a log of every joke that you've ever done, so that you can go back. You might be using exactly the same joke, but you might rehash it and you might make something new from it. So I tend not to recycle as much as possible. But unfortunately, especially if you're trying out new stuff, to the last point that you made of like wanting to make it a nice occasion for your crowd, I tend not to go in there with completely new stuff, because I just think if it's the first time that I'm saying it, it could be utter shit, and I don't want that person to go, God, that was 5 minutes that I wish that I hadn't spent doing this, or that's 5 minutes I'm never going to get back. So I tend to sandwich it in with new stuff, but it's usually with a view to be able to bank it, and then when I've got a longer spot, I can work it into a 20-minute set, say.
What constitutes as a good, like, this is smashed it, this is the shit? Is it like the roars where like people are pissing down, or like it's a feeling that you get?
So it's a good question, actually, because there are definitely jokes that I've done that I've gone, I really like that joke, but no one else seems to like it. And so I've wheeled it out a few times and gone, hey, laugh, and then they don't, and then I'm like, okay, right, well, maybe I should just not do that joke now, or maybe it's a sort of joke that I can do when I'm a little bit more established and people sort of know what they're getting, because I think some of the stuff that some of the jokes that I can come up with can feel a little bit left field, and it's a lot to acclimatize to somebody and understand someone when they're only on stage for 5 minutes or 7 minutes, even 10. So there are some of those. But generally speaking, it's to do with audience reception, like how much laughter do you get, and also sometimes people will actively say, I loved that joke. And there'll be crowds where you at the end they'll go, I loved that joke specifically. You do that joke somewhere else and no one will like it.
You know how you were telling in regards to certain jokes before, if somebody books you, do you tell the booker specific things that you're going to touch on, or not really? No. So if there are consequences, it's just dealt with?
I mean, there haven't been any so far. I think you asked earlier about having videos that you share, and is that not enough to book them? A lot of the time, that is how I get bookings, and people, and that's why I said I think it's really important to put in some of those dark jokes that I do, because I do want people to know what they're buying into if they book me. And I might not necessarily do that joke, but you should know that tonally, I'm a bit like this. I'm a bit blue, I'm a bit dark, I'm a bit uncomfortable. So yeah, generally speaking, they know what they're getting. And I've not had any complaints so far. Fingers crossed.
In terms of your writing, it mentions a lot of your script writing. And do you do theatre as well?
No, I don't do theatre. I mean, I'd love to. I did it when I was in sixth form.
Yeah.
But I honestly don't think I have the memory for it now. I don't think I do.
But from a writer's perspective, intrigued to know the writing style that you have as a writer.
I see.
Does that include comedy bits, or is that like completely drama and thriller based or horror that you were talking about before?
So I don't write theatre at all, but I do write scripts and I do sitcom. Sorry, I just do sitcoms and sketches and stuff. And so obviously you've seen some of the sketches with Moan, and the sitcoms are kind of in the works. It's just because it's so demanding. It's just not something like, personally, I can't do it in tandem with a full-time job and stand up being as busy as it is right now. So it's kind of, unfortunately, it's kind of like one pursuit or the other. Either I pursue the writing with a day job or I pursue the stand-up with a day job. And at the moment, the one that is giving most gains is the stand-up. So that's taking precedence right now.
Let's talk about then writing comedy in terms of stand-up and things like that. Intrigued to know how a joke comes to you, how you fine-tune it, and also what the line is for you when you're adding like personal bits into it. So like, let's say if you're adding like stories of your partner or your loved ones or your friends and things like that. Because I was watching an American, like, it's interesting as well. I love female comics. Like, that's my drive. Like, the amount of female comedians that I watch, like even Pakistan, like Busha Ansari was like the shit for me. And there's this American comedian by the name of Kathy Griffin who talks about like the fine line for comics is like so apparent to them, but for the outside people, they don't know. So intrigued to know your perspective on all of that.
There is a fine line. I think it goes to the point that I made earlier about kind of understanding why you're making a joke and what you're inviting people to laugh at and find humor in. I'm wondering how far to go on this. I'm wondering what to talk about. Like,
are you editing already?
I'm editing in my brain already. Yeah. Okay. So
listen, you know what? Yeah, it's your call. It's your call and how much you want to share.
Yeah, so I have a set of very particularly dark jokes, and they are based around the abuse that I suffered when I was 11 years old. Now, that's something, obviously that's not right for comedy in most people's minds, but I thought it was really important to be able to bring that out of the taboo that it is, because the person that it affects the most is the person who was abused, and in a way you make them taboo, and this thing they had no choice over what happened to them. I think for me it was more about sort of making it a topic of comedy, because it's a way of me being able to own what happened to me and not be a victim of what happened to me, because I'm turning it around into something that is beneficial for me. So at some point in my life, when I hope to be able to tour and things like that, not only will this be something that I hope other abuse victims will be able to watch and listen to, and instead of feeling triggered by it because they're being laughed at, that they feel as though there's somebody who has gone through this thing, has come through it, and has processed it in a way whereby we're no longer the ones that should be ashamed of anything. We've got nothing to be ashamed of. So me talking about my abuse is the same thing as me talking about, why my curtains don't match my sofa or something like that. It should be something that I should be as unashamed of as something mundane, because there is nothing for me to be ashamed of. So why should I not be able to speak about that on stage? Obviously, it's a very, very delicate balance, and it still makes crowds really uncomfortable. I've done that set, I think, 3 times. The first time I did it, it absolutely killed, and the audience loved it and absolutely smashed it. And then the last 2 times that I did it, the audience they were so tense, and you could feel the tension in the room. And I still think that's obviously to do with the very understandable taboo of childhood abuse. But then, as an abuse victim, you find yourself being made to feel ashamed of it, even though you had nothing to do with it.
Which goes back to one of the things that I read in one of your interviews. It's about audience understanding as well, and the actual audience as well, and the weight of the topic. So yeah, really fascinating about that. Maybe you should do it on Eid. somewhere really specific, on a Mela or something, sponsored by Lebara Mobile.
Exactly, I love it.
Yeah, and Sunrise Radio. The separation of comedy, which I feel like, I don't know if it's just my perspective or it's just a perspective which I talked about pre-interview, which is there's a section of comedy which is very ethnically and religious based or regionally based. And then there's mainstream comedy, which is like either televised or household names that you kind of know of. Intrigued to know, when you got into it, did you know what sort of sectors you wanted to dominate or walk down the path of? And your thoughts on the boxing of, let's take even comedy out of it, just creatives and artists sometimes, just as either there'll be cultural, regional, South Asian, female, POC, whatever it will be. So yeah.
I think when I first started out, I knew that I didn't want to be known as the brown comic or the female comic, or I didn't want to be boxed in like that. Or the Muslim comic. I think those things can be very restrictive. And actually, even with talking and working with Marwan, he had a very, very, very heavy Asian following. And it meant that he then had to create content that catered to that audience. And I remember thinking that must be really restrictive. Like you can't really break out of that mold, because as soon as you do, your target audience don't like it, and then you lose your audience. And what do you do? And I never wanted to get myself into that fix and that situation where now I'm wedded to this group of people, and I can't do anything creatively outside of those parameters. And although Moan's done a brilliant job of being able to break out of that, I think a lot of other people don't. And so that's the reason why when I do brown jokes on stage, it's never the full set. The full set is not about being foreign. It's not about being brown. There may be a couple of those jokes thrown in there, but they're also not jokes about like relatability. Like, oh, remember when you used to get hit by the chapel? It's not jokes like that, right? They're jokes that I hope are thoughtful. I'm hoping that the audience are thinking about what I'm saying, although that, I'm not Dostoevsky on stage, but I'm hoping that these are still things that people are like, they're processing it at least. I think there's sort of white comedy, through what I mean is white sugar comedy or white bread comedy.
You gotta clarify before people come for you.
Exactly,
Treading those, sorry, go for it. I was like treading those waters where people are like, oh.
Yeah. Well, yeah, what I class as like white bread or white sugar comedy, where it's just easily processed. The joke's there and it's there and that's it. And you don't need to do anything with it. You don't need to think about it. You don't need to listen even. You can probably hear a whole joke, listen to, if it's got 20 words in it, you can listen to about 7 and you probably will still get the punchline. So although I do have brown jokes in there, because that's absolutely part of my identity, it doesn't underpin my set. Although I do have jokes that are very blue, I wouldn't consider myself to be a blue comic, because first of all, my set isn't all about that, but also I look at it from the perspective of breaking down some of those stereotypes of what a South Asian girl should talk about, and what a South Asian girl, particularly a Pakistani girl and a Muslim girl, what should we be talking about? What shouldn't we be talking about? And I kind of think, why shouldn't we be talking about those things? And then, yeah, so I think although I kind of, I do have jokes about being female, being brown, being Muslim, being, any number of other things. I never want to be known as just one of those things, because all those things are part of my identity, but I don't want to be boxed into that identity.
May I say something which is a challenge for you, and it's also a challenge for me, and I realized why to do that through a couple of casting directors and mentors that said you need to define, which is on your comedy bios and things like that, it does mention like blue, female, Muslim and things like that. Is that so not calling out a contradiction or a challenge, is that because you need to be able to label or sell so that these people have like XXXX, or is that so?
I think in particular, being a brown girl that does blue material, although you see more of it now, which is great, I also mentioned that I do blue material and dark material.
Yeah.
Because there isn't a ton of marrying of those two things, particularly when it comes to your culture or your religion. It's usually one or the other, particularly when it comes to South Asian females. And maybe there are some out there. I haven't personally met them or encountered them. I'm sure there are, but they're not. It's part of what I it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with sending a video. I want people to have an expectation of to have an idea of what to expect. I don't want people to look at my my picture and go, oh, she's an Asian comic, so therefore we assume that she's going to do Asian content, or she's a Muslim comic, therefore we expect her to do Muslim content. It's kind of a way to be able to say, look, my name is quite obviously Muslim, I'm obviously Asian, but I also want you to know, so those are two givens, but I also want you to know that the stuff that I talk about is dark and it's blue and it's uncomfortable. So it's kind of, in a way, just being able to manage expectations, I suppose.
Intrigued to know your perspective on digital space becoming a footprint now of existing and people knowing your work, and how people have been able to monetize that and create either production deals, TV shows, or comedy specials, or get into certain spaces out of it. So I think I mentioned like Smash Bengali or like Mo the Comedian in terms of like the Asian space, or Zarna Gurg, who just literally got like a Prime deal. Intrigued to know why you do that, or you don't do that? Have you made a conscious decision? Are you going to do it? And your thoughts on starting off in the YouTube space and how that became a space for a lot of comedians or just people of creative backgrounds to kind of like monetize that.
It's something that I know that I should do, and I don't do it because I'm a Luddite. And I don't really know how it all works. I don't really know what I'm supposed to do. It's like teaching your mum how to use Google. That's literally what it's like for me, trying to figure out what Instagram is and you know, the value of it. The thing is, I'm very aware of the value of it, and how it can really accelerate someone's profile and TikTok and things like that. I suppose I'm a little bit reticent to put things on TikTok because and this is my personal opinion, I think there's a lot of really mediocre to bad content on TikTok. But because of the nature of TikTok, where they're like very short second videos, like very few second videos, you can afford for something to be crap and mediocre because it's getting so much of it. Do you know what I mean? I just feel like it's the nettos of comedy.
It's just pumped at you.
Yeah. So it doesn't actually have to be particularly good quality because, yeah, that video wasn't brilliant, but you'll see 12 other videos before you get out of bed in the morning. So it doesn't matter. And I think the approach that I take to comedy is the same as it is to painting. It will take me weeks to get a painting done because I want it done properly and I want it to look good. And it's the same with my comedy. I don't want to put out mediocre crap stuff. That just generally takes me longer to think of things to put out. I think, you know, no disrespect to anyone who does TikTok, but
I have massive disrespect towards you.
But like, you know, in terms of, you know, I mean, like, my boyfriend's a massive fan of it. He's a huge fan of it. But he finds like recipes and things and he'll send those to me, or like, you know, there are really creative, fun things that are being done on TikTok. I don't know that I have the know-how to truly hone in on that just yet. I think that's going to be something I'll have to learn. And if I wanted to put content out there for the sake of it, I fear that it would be part of that sea of mediocre shit that I see out there. And it wouldn't be to the standard that I want it to be. So I think it's a mixture of not knowing what to put out and where and in what format and what works and what doesn't work. And also wanting to make sure that I maintain my own standards, I suppose, and not wanting to put out something that I think is subpar just for the sake of putting something out.
All right. Can you quickly, in like a minute, tell me your intro into comedy? Because I couldn't find it anywhere. And it was just like, oh, I was good at comedy, so I just did it. That's all I found. And I was like, that doesn't tell me, like, did you study it? Where was your first gig? What job were you in corporate banking before you did it? You said retail, but like, tell me, paint me a picture for crying out loud.
I mean, honestly, there really isn't much more to say. I was at uni, Actually, maybe this does paint a picture. I was at uni and I was particularly depressed, and I thought maybe I could do comedy. That's genuinely what it was. It was at my lowest point in my second year of university that I thought maybe I could do comedy.
What did you study?
I did English literature. Yeah, I did English literature. It's strange. The thing is, I didn't make the connection of like, oh yeah, comics are like tortured depressives as well. It wasn't like that at all. It was genuinely, I suppose it probably was because I was in such a dark place in my second year of uni that probably one of the few things that gave me any relief was watching comedy. And so, yeah, I remember watching it and thinking, you know, I think when I'm done with this, I'll probably start doing stand-up and just see how it goes. And then I did my first gig at Downstairs at the King's Head, which is genuinely generally perceived to be one of the best comedy venues in London. And I absolutely killed it. In spite of myself, I absolutely killed it. And I don't really know how I managed that. But I remember being really nervous. It was the first time I'd performed anything since I formed at sixth form. But yeah, it was very different then. I was way more, I was quite a prickly comedian. I was very sort of like staid, not very warm, and very sort of prickly. And that was the thing. But I don't know. I mean, I guess it worked at the time because I did really well.
And your parents, how was that conversation with your loved ones? I'm intrigued to know that if you want to touch up on it. And have they come to a show yet?
So my mum knows that I do stand up. She knew that I did stand up almost pretty much from the beginning. She knew that I did it. My mum was always the more liberal one. She was always the one that sort of encouraged us. Like she was always silly with us. And you know, my dad is very old school. Yeah, and you know, it was like even putting faces we weren't allowed to, and he would shout at us for putting faces, and then when he turned away, my mum would pull a face at us and we'd laugh. So she was always wonderful like that. So I told her that I was doing comedy, and also she had to know as to why I was coming out late every day. Otherwise she'd think, you know, I was out having a boyfriend, God forbid.
Yeah, so, which would be better, by the way, when you told her.
Exactly. Yeah. It's honestly, it's difficult to know. It's a toss up, isn't it? Like, would you rather I was sleeping around, or would you rather I was on stage doing hi? So, but she was cool with it. She was like, yeah, you know, if you think you can make a living off this, like, go ahead and do it. And then I told my dad several years ago that I was writing comedy.
Yeah.
And he was like, really? And I said, yeah. And he was like, oh, that's very sophisticated. Which says a lot
title
about
of episode. That's very specific. There you go. That's the title of the episode.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's very sophisticated. I just thought, what does my dad think of me? What does he possibly think of me? But so I don't think my dad knows so much about my doing stand-up. I don't think he would be surprised, but I don't think he knows about it. In terms of anyone from the family who's attended, no one's attended from my family. It's like, the thing is, I mean, you've seen stuff that I do on stage. It's very blue, and it's blue on purpose because I'm trying to humanize Muslim women. You know, we're no different to any other women on the planet. So I cut in with that right from the beginning because I want it to be clear that you're not going to get the chuckle jokes. That's just not going to happen with me. So I set out the expectations very early on. None of my family have come to see the jokes yet. I mean, I've invited, you know, I might invite my sisters at some point, and not even all of them. Actually, no, my sister's seen me do stand up. She saw me do stand up when I did the character act, but I was doing nowhere near the same material that I'm doing now. So I'm sure at some point I will. I think it's tough for them as well. I'm the youngest. I'm the baby of the family. So I think it's weird for them. It's weird for them to hear me talk about certain things. So.
Well, let's do some rapid questions before we do games. All right? Rapid. This is not 5 seconds, but this is just rapid. Okay. What's your favorite part of the job?
Forming.
Okay. 3 things this industry could do with or without.
Some regulation.
Just some.
Some regulation, yeah. Because I think as soon, but by regulation I mean the personalities that are in charge. It's very often sort of like not all the time. In fact, I was at a gig yesterday called Top and Bottom Comedy, and they're a pair of guys who MC, and they're lovely. And it's not that often that you meet sort of people who are running gigs who are actually really nice and very friendly and not kind of weird in any way. So I think that it would be good to have somebody kind of, you know, like a HR person in comedy, kind of go, you know, don't be weird, and don't be a bit of a lech, and don't be a bit, you know, whatever. I mean, again, generally speaking, I've been, certainly in more recent years, I've been quite lucky. Early on, I definitely had my fair share of weirdos.
Yeah.
But I think since Me Too, people have been a bit more cognizant of how they come across. But from what I hear from other female comics, there's still quite a lot of it around. And so although my personal experience of late hasn't been, you know, kind of weird, creepy men, just some that are a little bit less friendly maybe, or, you know, whatever, I do think it would be good to have something in place, certainly for new and younger comics who don't really know how to traverse the industry. I think that would be good. Some regulation would be good. I think more paid gigs would be good. You know, I know there's a lot about, you know, well, we're doing this for free too. And you can, well, I mean, you are and you aren't. You know, I think there are definitely some nights where they could probably do a bucket split. And even if everyone got £5, I still think it would help people. You know, the thing is essentially give up your whole evening for 5 minutes on stage. And so it can feel a little shit if you are you know, you do that and then you get absolutely nothing at the end of it. So I think particularly for certain gigs, if they can afford it, they should charge they should pay their act. I think it'd be good to have a bit more generosity in comedy. And then the third would be, I think the third would be as well for there to be, and this is my wish list and not based on anything that I think could happen, but to get rid of the bringer. So the bringer is you can only perform if you have someone with you. So like very often what will happen is you'll be performing as a comic in front of just other bringers. And that doesn't mean that it's not a good audience. It doesn't mean it's not a good night, but it also means that you're not really performing in front of a quote unquote real audience, because they're all people that are there with a really supportive brain and mind because they don't want to be a dick. And although that absolutely has its place if you're starting out and you want a safe place to try new jokes, you don't want the baptism of fire of doing the Comedy Store or hot water comedy. Those places absolutely have a benefit for having bringers, but it's almost ubiquitous across comedy when you talk about open mic comedy. And there are other schemes that, like, you know, you can be your own bringer and things like that, and those provide loads of really good flexibility as well, but it's also an additional evening out of your night to be your own bringer. So I think in an ideal world, you wouldn't need to have a bringer gig because you would have you'd have real audience in. But again, that's kind of more to do with the world changing and people actually taking an interest in comedy and wanting to take an evening out and taking a chance on a bunch of nobodies, hopefully making them laugh. So it's not so much a thing about the industry that I'd like to change. It's more sort of about the landscape of comedy. If I could change something about the landscape of comedy, it would be having more people genuinely interested. And then if we had that, we could do away with bringers.
3 things you wish somebody would have told you and nobody did, and you had to find for yourself that now you would like to part on somebody else.
With comedy?
Anything, life, put sugar in after. I don't know.
Okay, life. Honestly, you don't know shit until you hit your 30s. You don't know anything until you hit your 30s.
So agree.
And don't focus so much on little things that don't matter because, yeah, I mean, honestly, I've started living in my 30s is when I started living, and it's been great. I would not go back to my 20s even if I could.
Same. I would go back for the funding opportunities, but I wouldn't go back for life experience. No.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Career, be mindful that this is a competitive field. Be mindful of the people that you choose to associate with and surround yourself with. Don't get threaded by somebody that you don't know.
Oh, that was a nice one. That covers anything. All right. What is a worst time to perform and a best time to perform?
I think like an afternoon, like a Saturday afternoon. Yeah. I mean, people want to be out, they want to be doing stuff. And if they've wandered in on a Saturday afternoon, they probably don't know what they've wandered into. So I'd say an afternoon gigs in my experience haven't been brilliant.
Like the brunch gigs?
Oh no, that's different because they know that it's comedy and brunch. They're expecting that. But it's like if you kind of go, oh, we randomly have a gig at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're gonna waterboard you with comedy while you're having your pizza, and no one knew about it. That sort of stuff doesn't really work. And then the best time, honestly, I think festivals. Festivals are. I mean, I've only ever done Edinburgh, to be fair. But whenever I've done Edinburgh, just open spots and things like that, people. When you get a crowd in, they're so up for it, and they are genuine crowds. So that's the reason why a lot of people do Edinburgh, because it's such a steep learning curve, because you're actually talking to audiences, not a room of bringers or a room of other comics. When you get an audience in, they're a real audience.
What is one thing that makes comedy good for you or great?
The ability to be able to fuck up and make mistakes, and for it to be okay.
How to deal with silence and reading the room.
I love it. If a room's silent, I mean, like I said, like before, it was mortifying when a room is silent. I mean, it also depends on the kinds of silence, to be fair. But if it's a silent because the joke doesn't work, that's fine. I'm totally okay with that. I'm fully at ease with that. But if it's silence because the crowd don't like you, it's a very different sort of silence. So
how do you know the difference though?
Well, you can tell. I did a gig in Stoke. Surely that's all I need to say. But I did a gig in Stoke, and they were not buying what I was selling. And it was, as you know, I've got some brown jokes, and so they were laughing at the brown stuff, and then anything that was to do with challenging them as white people.
Yeah,
they were absolutely not having, and it felt like they never. I mean, it just didn't feel like they ever warmed to me. So it felt like it was that they didn't like me specifically. And I think when that happens, it's difficult to not go down a black hole and go, well, what is it? Is it because I'm a Southerner and they're Northerners? Is it because I'm a Londoner? Is it because I'm brown? Is it because I'm female? Is it all of those things? And then when you've got all that going around in your head on stage, it doesn't make for a particularly fun time. So it's to do with like, how has the gig gone up to now, you know? And if you're encountering silence because a joke isn't doing that well, it's because a joke's not doing that well. Because prior to this, you were doing quite well and the audience seemed to be sort of receptive and warm. But if you go on stage and it was frosty from the beginning before you even said anything, I think that's how you know that it's not a particularly warm crowd, and it's certainly not warm to you.
Peaks and valleys is a question I ask everybody. A peak is a high point of your personal or professional life. What was it? What lesson you learned from it? A valley is a low point of your personal or professional life. What was it? What lesson you learned from it?
Okay, highs. Honestly, it's going to sound really soppy, but meeting my partner, I think I'd had a particularly rough couple of years, which will be my valley, by the way. I'd had a rough couple of years, and I just generally had not a lot of faith in humanity. And then I met this person, and he was just and is just the most incredible, wonderful, kind person that I've ever met, and genuinely such a joy to know somebody like that. And I'm in awe all the time at how kind he is, no matter what's going on with him, that he's just wonderful. That's a definite peak. The lesson I learned was to try and be kind all the time. You know, I think sometimes it's like, oh, it's easy to be kind at some points, and that is true. And it's not always easy to, I come from a very sort of like spirited family where we would argue all the time and we'd say shitty things to each other, would freeze each other out, would do really mean things to each other because we wanted them to feel bad. And he's not about that at all. It's all about, why would I want to make you feel bad? I love you and I care for you. So why would I want to do that? If I'm feeling upset, then I'll tell you. Yeah. We can talk about it. And it's not about one-upmanship or having a sly dig so that you can feel better about it after. It's just about like being honest about your feelings about something and being upfront and transparent and being respectful of other people. And it's all those really nice, wonderful life lessons that I met and learned all from meeting one person.
And at Valley?
Valley. Well, it was when I was living out, and I had a housemate who was just the worst, just unbelievably selfish and unpleasant. But it was sort of, this was during lockdown, so I couldn't escape, just imprisoned. It was like Saw 7. I just had to like lobotomize parts of my brain to deal with living with the guy, and he was just awful. And he was just, obviously like a very troubled guy, but I had no idea about that obviously when we kind of invited him to live with us in our house. But it was very low. Like, I think being confined to a space with someone that you can't escape, you can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Someone that you really, really dislike on a personal level, who's just like very entitled and very selfish and very...
This is going to be out there just in case they listen.
Oh, I couldn't give a fuck. In fact, I bet him hearing that he's being referenced would give him a hard on. That's how much of a narcissist he is. Sure, he would love it. So yeah, I think I can't think of. I think that's definitely in more recent years a big low, was having to live with that guy and having to. I mean, it was only for a few weeks, but I remember feeling really, really, really like my sister was like, I haven't seen you this bad or this anxious for a long time. Yeah, it was lockdown as well. It was also it was a mixture of a lot of things, but he was primarily the fate of my life at that point. The lesson I learned was, it taught me that I need to, although your instincts are good, you also need to take stock of when there are red flags, and also try and understand people who you don't have a gut feeling about. So I think it was also a lesson in not jumping to conclusions about people, giving people the grace to assuming the best in people, or at least giving some thought as to why somebody might be doing something, but then also accepting that someone's a prick when they've shown you that they're a prick.
Last question before we get into the games. Last two. What words of wisdom would you give to your mirror self? Go.
Back then or from now?
From now. Why would you give it from back then? You're looking in the mirror right now, like literally.
Because I'll tell you why. Because I would say stop eating so many fucking Snickers bars. That's what I would say.
Oh, but they're so delicious. They
are delicious.
That's why I can't have them anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. But the thing is, when I was younger, my metabolism could process it. It was fine. But then you go into a sedentary lifestyle and you can't eat a whole 4-pack of Kit Kat peanut butter bars anymore.
I mean, you can. It's just You gotta be happy with how you look,
Exactly
which is
that. Yeah.
fine because like
Look, absolutely fine. But at the same time, I am so unfit. It is unreal. Like I have to walk up a slight gradient to get to my station, my train station, and I'm out of breath by the top of it. That is not what I should be like at the age of 30.
do you have asthma?
No, I'm just unfit.
Why you just go do yoga 5 minutes a day or like I don't know, go for a walk then?
Because I don't like it.
Go to a dance class. How about that? Go to a dance class.
You know, I have like I'm really uncoordinated. I'd love to do a dance. I'd love to be able to dance and
But
learn to
how are you gonna
dance.
get there if you don't go to some?
I know what you mean, but I feel like I look like an octopus being thrown through the air.
It doesn't matter. Sometimes it's just about feeling good. You're like, give a shit. Let's just go to Tesco's and fuck that life. I think I said this to you in pre-interview, which is last deep meaningful question, which is if you remove everything, would you end up where you are? So for me, the three pillars of what makes a person convicted in their path is their confidence and grit, who they are as a person that came from within, or spirituality or religion. Faith is the second pillar, and the third is, I'm not describing the Islamic 5 pillars, these are like my 3 pillars.
Yeah.
From what the third pillar would be support. That can be like financial support, that can be emotional support, that can be like friends and family, however you want to reinterpret that. Not knowing anything about you that much, if you didn't have those 3 things, would you find your path to where you are today, be the person that you are today, and do the work that you're doing today? Do you feel like you would have?
No, absolutely not. No, those are 3 really good. Those are 3 really good. Those are 3 really good pillars to live by. The thing is, if you want to do anything creative, you absolutely need all 3 of those things. Like you kind of, in a way, you sort of you need those things. You need a little bit of delusion, because you kind of like you honestly do. You need a little bit of delusion to go. But there's that chance that I could make it. There's that chance that I could do what I want to do creatively as a living.
Yeah.
You need that, and that's your faith. You need the confidence, because if you are not confident enough to show your work, whatever it is, no one's ever going to see it. So that's that. And then support. I mean, I honestly, over the past few weeks where I've been gigging so much, I wouldn't have been able to do it if it wasn't for my partner. I wouldn't be able to do it. He is an ever-flowing well of support and kindness and consistency. I think consistency is a big one. Having someone who's just there and is, rooting for you and has got your back.
All right, and this is the game section. These are games called Sip a Chai or Play with Rye. There's gonna be different sections in it. We're gonna try and bounce through this like very, very quickly. I'm telling you right now, okay? First thing that comes into your head. Right. If you were a movie, what would the title of that movie be? Original. Go.
Fuck.
Okay, it'll be called Fuck. Who would star in Fuck? Give me 3 actors that would star in Fuck. Apparently Emily Blunt, who you love so much.
Emily Blunt? Have I ever mentioned Emily Blunt?
You have, but never mind. Screw her. She's out right now.
Okay.
Give me 3 actors that would star in Fuck.
Oh God, I can't think of anyone.
God can't star in your film. She doesn't exist.
Star in my film. Oh God. Do you know what? I wish I'd known these beforehand so I could give you quick fire answers, because I do not have these.
Give me 3 people that come straight into your head right now.
Well, most of them are dead.
That's okay. Give them.
Okay, Philip Seymour Hoffman.
AI.
Okay.
AI versions of them.
Right. Philip Seymour Hoffman, Viola Davis, Meryl Streep.
Both are alive, so...
But those 2 are alive, yeah.
Yeah, those 2 are alive. I was like, are they dead? Do we not know about this? You know the IMDb logline situation? Give me a logline situation that would go on IMDb to support Fuck. Watch it in cinemas now.
She doesn't know what to do with her life, so she fucks, yeah.
I love that. Can you please make it? If you were a drink, what drink would you be?
A lychee drink, a non-alcoholic lychee drink.
Okay. If you were a food, what cuisine and dish would you be?
I mean, I have to stay humble. I have to stay humble to my roots. It has to be a curry. Okay. No, my favorite curry is a yam and aubergine curry. I'd go with that.
Okay, nice. If you were a fruit, what would you be?
Watermelon.
If you were a color, what would you be?
Blue.
Clothing item. Clothing item. I don't know why I muttered.
A bodysuit.
If you were a flower or plant, which one would you be and what type?
Cactus.
Okay. Have you ever, is the next section. Have you ever hooked up with a fellow artiste or an admirer?
Yes.
Have you ever flirted to get ahead in your career or in life?
Not consciously.
Not conscious.
Not consciously. I think I'm quite naturally flirtatious.
Got it. Have you ever joined the Mile High Club or done anything intimate in the public?
No.
Have you ever peed while swimming?
No, I don't know how to swim.
That could be a thing as well. Go swim. It's the best thing about I love swimming. Have you ever forgotten words and made it up on the spot, like improv?
Yes, but as you've seen from this podcast, I'm not brilliant at it.
Okay. Have you ever eaten within a couple of seconds of something dropping on the floor or in the bin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not in the bin.
Not
on the floor.
Bin. What would you rather, cookies or cake?
Cake.
Rich or fame?
Rich.
Critical acclaim or win lots of awards?
Critical acclaim.
Netflix or Prime?
Netflix.
Fairy tales, mythological tales, or real life stories?
Real life stories.
World peace or equality?
Well, world peace would be equality, I guess.
I'm waiting for somebody to fuck up to one of these and just be like, world peace. Next one. Because usually people are like, equality to lead to world peace. World peace is equality.
Yeah.
Dogs or cats?
Cats.
Jalebi or gulab jamun?
Jalebi.
Snickers or Kit Kat?
Snickers.
And the next section is called Can You Improv Though? Which is, I'm going to give you 3 words, okay? You have the option. What would you rather? Would you rather tell me a 60-second joke, or would you rather do a 60-second monologue, or would you rather pitch me a project that I have £1 million and if I'm going to fund this project, yes or no?
The second one, monologue.
Monologue. Okay. So you must include these 3 words in your monologue, in your 60-second monologue. Would you like me to type them for you? Or
yes,
you...
please. Otherwise, okay. I'm going to forget.
Chamois and meritocracy. Your 60 seconds starts now.
I was out hunting one day and I was wearing my very bright red beret. And I came across a chamois, and I thought to myself, if I shoot and kill that chamois, I can bring it home and everyone will love me because I'll go, oh, aren't I a brilliant hunter? Anyway, I did it. I set up the gun and I put the crosshair on the right place and I killed the chamois and I took it home and I was like, everyone's gonna love me, everyone's gonna think I'm brilliant. And then I got home and I like kicked down the door and I was like, look at my chamois, look at what I killed, look what I brought in. And then I'd seen my sister had killed like a little squirrel and everyone was bigging her up and everyone was like, oh yeah, but look at her squirrel, it's like, it's brilliant. And I was like, nah man, the squirrel was like rubbish in it. And that was when I realized that life was not a meritocracy.
Oh! I thought you were gonna not say the last word, and I was like, well done. Well done. This brings us to my last 2 questions, and then that is it.
Okay.
Everybody loves a rant. You get to rant for 30 seconds about anything and everything that you want. However, the rule is you must start or end your rant with "What the chai?" It used to be called "Bitch Don't," but I want to do merch, so I'm changing it to "What the chai?" Okay, this is your 30 seconds. What the chai? Go.
Okay. All right. So I have an issue with boring people because it's this is the thing, right? There's nothing wrong with them personally, and I'm sure that they're not all bad people. But when they end up taking your time and you feel like you've been physically cornered by someone who just wants to talk to you about shredded wheat or what feels like shredded wheat, it's the driest, most boring thing. It's the most frustrating thing. What the chai? Well
done. Well done. And your last question is, I am obsessed this year with being joyful and bringing joyfulness to other people. What is one thing that you do for yourself that makes you feel joyful? And what is one thing you do for others that makes them feel joyful?
Bought my house last year, and I really enjoy buying little bits for it and decorating and like nesting. That's what brings me joy, just finding little bits to kind of put in my home. And then what was the other thing?
Oh, what makes
other people happy?
Yeah, one thing you do for them.
My boyfriend likes when I cook for him, so I like to cook for him.
What's like your thing?
I do a seafood risotto, which he really likes. I make it like nice and spicy and cheesy.
Oh, cute. Well, everyone, that brings us to an end, and I hope you enjoyed that. I want to say a massive thank you to the guest for their time. All of the information about the guest, myself, and the show will be listed in the bio. Make sure to follow, share, comment, and subscribe. Show us all some love, because isn't that what we want at the end of the day? Some love. Your support really helps the show and the message of it grow, and the people that are on here. Thank you again, and as I always say, breathe in, breathe out. Now must go, which means now I must go. I own that is copyrighted and I will sue. Joking. Have a great one and stay curious. Till next time.